Look at this scene. This is incredible. This is heaven. This is Datsun heaven. This is all Randy's. Hi, Randy.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
So this is my first time coming to see this collection. Randy is a big Datsun collector, if you can't tell already. Datsun, Nissan. And yeah, we're in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, so the story, it all started when I got to get my, or I sent my car to Z Car Garage. Rob Fuller in San Jose, California, he basically redid my entire car on the mechanical side. So he kept saying, you gotta check out Randy Jaffe's collection. And I'm like, so who is this guy? I keep driving his cars, I keep photographing his cars all the way in California, but I've never met the guy. So now we're in Atlanta for Formula Drift season opener. And yeah, I figured I'll stop by and check out your collection. But honestly, when I walked in here, I just seriously got the chills. I've never seen anything like this before. You know, I've traveled the world photographing cars. I've had a chance to visit Nissan. I've had a chance to visit so many places, but it's just so nondescript, and it's like you just get so blown away so quickly. You've done an incredible job. I don't even know so much about half of these things, but I just know that there's just so much history here, and yeah, thank you so much for preserving history.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, the reason you don't see a lot of these places is because there's not too many of us Datsun dorks out there. It's funny. I've always been a 911 guy, and been lucky enough to have some 911s, drive a 930 as a daily along with my other 240Z. But at the end of the day, when 20 years ago, when I drove up in a Datsun, people are going like, "Why do you like those cars? They kind of, you know, aren't they kind of cheap?" And I go, "Well, go drive one. Go drive one." And the dependability, like we talked about on the other video, they're just great cars. They're just great cars. They gave a 911 a fit for a while, although, like I said, I'm a 911 guy. But Z cars and 911 have always been my 1-2 punch, and just love the history. And like we talked about on the other video, the history with John Morton and Peter Brock, and got to be friends with basically my heroes when I was a kid is pretty cool. It really is really cool. And then Rob Fuller, like we talked about, this probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Rob, because he just allows me to take the cars to the level they need to be taken, because there's nobody that really does this anymore. Like, all the Z shops have pretty much closed around here, or one of the guys that used to have a shop here, he just passed away. So there's not anybody you can find. So I'm in Alpharetta, Georgia, but I have to ship my cars to San Jose, California, because I trust Rob to do it right. He and Joshua are just an amazing 1-2 punch. Josh is the guy that wrenches on all my cars, and he's the best.
It's kind of interesting. I don't actually, it's one of those things that I've thought of, but I haven't really put too much thought into it. I don't actually know the answer to this. In Southern California, there's so many Z shops, like Z and Datsun shops. It's such a weird thing. It's like, why is it that there's a specialty for just that marquee? I don't even know why.
Out in California, you mean?
Well, all over the world, it seems like instead of it just being like a classic Japanese car shop.
Well, if you look at this picture here, and this was taken at Road Atlanta in 1970 when the cars first hit here in the States. I mean, that's John Morton and the Roadster, and then that's Peter Brock standing there. John's actually in the car, and that helmet over there is on the shelf around the corner. Mm-hmm. And that fender on that blue-white car is the fender that's on the ground here. They only had one incident in the 2 years they drove the 46 and the 3 car. John McComb drove the car in 70, the blue-white car, and then Dan Parkinson drove it in 71. John, of course, drove the 46Z both years, but they only have one incident where this fender had a casualty, and they had I guess it was in Hoytville, which is near San Diego. Dan ran off and hit the hay bales, but Morton knew that like that 50 years later. I said, I got this fender, and do you remember what happened? He said it like it happened last week. Those guys, you know, I guess they don't have all that internet stuff in their head. They can remember what actually went on back then. But when those cars first hit here, they were iconic. You know, it looked like it had the long nose, the the sail panel, the short rear end, and it just has always had an iconic look to a lot of people and mass appeal.
Because the thing is, like, versus like a Porsche shop, for example, there's just certain things, there's quirky things about a lot of specialty cars that you kind of just have to know your way around to fix them. But realistically, these old Datsuns, it's not even that hard to work on, but it's almost, part of it is that it's the love for them. You know, you have to get them done right. You have to get them worked on correctly. And you want, you know, the most attention on these things because for the longest time, and you remember this, like, for example, I bought number 2,868 for $3,000.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
That party's been is now
that's
over.
Long gone.
Well, what Rob and I talk about is, and Bring a Trailer has been a great venue. It's been a very successful venue to sell, and well, it's better to sell cars because now the buyers have to pay more. But it's good for everybody because it brings a lot of these cars into focus. But we've priced ourselves out of the Z market. I mean, all of us Datsun dorks, we always knew how bitchin' these cars were. But nobody else ever gave him any love. Like I said, people used to laugh at me when I'd pull up in a Datsun. They go, what do you have one of these little Japanese cars for? Yeah,
I mean, now it probably makes sense, right? You bring a very well-restored or very clean 240Z to a shop, and then whatever, you put $10,000 into it. But before, could you imagine, like, you buy a car for $3,000 and you bring it to a shop and it costs $10,000? It's like, well, doesn't make any sense.
Nobody would do it. You know, what's fun is I call it the Ratson over here, is a car that I bought from a friend of mine in Chattanooga, Wayne Bridges. And that car is a 53,000 original, you know, 918 orange car. And you know, it's so easy to work on. I mean, I'm not a wrench guy, but it's so easy to get, you know, work done to it if you take it to the right place. Like, unfortunately, I have to take it to San Jose. There's, like I said earlier, there's not many people still around that know how to work on them.
Okay, so let's start with let's check out your collection. Let's start with this. What is this?
So back in the late 60s, this is 1968, Datsun Roadster 2000. So Peter Brock prepared, it's really fun, it's a crazy story. I mean, we could digress all day long, but Peter Brock basically had the contract to race the Toyota 2000 GTs in the United States. And at the last minute, Carroll Shelby ended up taking a dealership, and they pulled it from Peter and gave it to Carroll Shelby. And at the time, Peter Brock knew who the old president of another company, I'll think of Hino, that went over to Nissan. So he went and talked to him over in Japan. And he goes, yes, Peter, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll send you a couple of Roadsters. You work on them, see what you can do. Well, Mr. Katayama was already here doing his own thing. And he was saying, like, who is this Peter Brock and what is this team that's winning in our cars? So it turns out they met each other, liked each other, and they decided for the 1970 season they would run the Z car. But they ran these cars for 2 years. They did very well. Unfortunately, Peter tells me all the time that they didn't set the air right. And when they went to Daytona, the last ARC championship, see, Daytona ended the runoffs in '69, and then it's Road Atlanta's first year, it was 1970. So in '69, both their Roadsters popped. The 44 Roadster that's in the picture over here, and the 46 Roadster. And this is just the shell only. And they both popped, so they didn't finish. And then these cars were sold. There's an ad, I think I have it somewhere, that Peter advertised both of these Roadsters for $5,500. I think it was in Auto Week.
Wow.
So one of them came back here to Atlanta, and Bob McQueen, no relation to Steve McQueen, he actually wrenched on a buddy of mine's car. He actually drove this car, which is in this picture, as a number 63 with the different color stripes, and won 2 national championships in D production.
So are you going to eventually restore this?
No, Adam has the chassis and everything else, and they ended up doing something else with the shell, and so it's just going to sit here as a static display.
No, I think it's definitely a statement. As soon as you walk in here, it's like, oh, this is cool. And then you look over here and it's like, oh my God, I'm blown away.
Yeah, this is how the car looked in the very beginning. Of course, that's John sitting in the car, and Mac Tilton and Peter Brock and the guys.
Amazing. So many things. You have all the models all over the place. But yeah, let's go down the line with some of these cars.
Sure.
Let's stop on this thing. This thing is super cool. What's the story?
So the story is here, and again, I mentioned this to you earlier. How often you see an article about a model car? But we found actually Glenn Chu in California found that article. He's we call him CSI Glenn, and he races. He's got several historic Datsun race cars, and so he dug up that article. But this model was built by this gentleman. I'm not sure if he's still around, but it ended up that the guy spent like 10,000 hours building this model. And I believe in this article it says how he used like women's underwear to build some of these braided lines. I mean, I don't know how a model builder does things like this on such a microscopic level.
Yeah.
And the details were unbelievable. This is the car that actually in 1976, Bob Sharp down the back straight here at Road Atlanta destroyed the car. It went into a million pieces and the car is no longer in existence. But this guy approached Bob Sharp and said, I built this model. And Bob says, well, how much do you want for the car? So he said, well, I just want $1 an hour, which was $10,000. And Bob said, no, I can't do that. And Bob's a great guy. We talk all the time. He actually signed this case for me. I took it to his house last year. So the story was this model builder took it on, I guess model cars have tours, and he took it around the United States for several years. And then somebody at Bob Sharp Motors, it was either the racing division or his Datsun dealerships, got in touch with this guy, and they ended up purchasing it and giving it to Bob for his birthday. And I ended up getting it.
Crazy. It's insane because that means he had to recreate it from pictures, right? Because it was already destroyed.
This is way out of my league. I have absolutely no idea how one goes about doing that. And I'm just glad it's intact with the base and the
and now
everything.
You have it on your coffee table.
Yeah, it's unbelievable piece. Yeah. And it's a 1/12 scale.
Let's go down the line and talk about some of your race cars here.
These are the nasty little girls, I call them. These little 510s, and I have some pictures when Peter Brock built from a white vanilla car. I mean, they look like the car your grandmother would go get groceries in. And BRE and Bob Sharp goes out and flares them and takes them from 1.6s to 1.8s and 2 liters. Actually, they only raced them with 1.6s and 1.8s, and ended up building these iconic 510 race cars. So Jim Fitzgerald, who is better known as Fitzy, Jim won over 350 SCCA races. This is him sitting in the car on the grid at Road Atlanta in 1972. And so Fitzy was the lead instructor at Road Atlanta, drove everywhere in a real big regional Southeast guy. He's the one that became best friends and his instructor to Paul Newman. Actually, Paul approached Bob Sharp. Bob told me this in his office last year, and he said, "Hey, I'd like you to build me a Z car." And Bob goes, "No, I'm not going to build you a Z car." He said, "You don't start on a Z car." He said, "I'll build you a little 510 sedan. You want to start with that? If that's what you want to do. Otherwise, I'm not going to build you a Z car." And Paul Newman was like, "Sure." And Paul was really, as Bob says, he was really a quick learner, and he's very studious about how he approached racing. So Bob Sharp built 3 of these. He built number 33 for himself. He built this 38 for Fitzy. And he built number 75 for Paul Newman. And by the way, this was the only Datsun that I recall that was actually on the grass at Amelia Island last year at the Concours. And it was literally the week before we shut down for COVID. And one of the best things about that weekend was his daughter, MJ. Mary Jo was Fitzy's daughter. She came with us. And it was great for her to be reunited with the car, and she really had a good time at Amelia last year with this thing. So they built the 3 510s, and then Paul Newman at practice in '73 here at Road Atlanta down the front straight ended up going off track and wrecking the car. And Bob had won the '72 National Championship B sedan in the 33 car, so he called up to Connecticut, said, "Somebody go to my house, bring the car down," and they brought it down and put a 75 on it. And Paul actually finished 6th that day. And that car still exists. John Baldwin owns that down in Louisiana. And it's painted in Paul Newman's silver and black livery. There's a model of it over there. So these 510s are amazing little 4-bangers that sound unbelievable on the track. And
my God. I can't believe how loud that thing is.
For a four-banger, it's crazy.
Jeez.
And you should hear it under load.
Yeah, well, 185 horsepower. Jeez. There's no graceful way to do that.
No. You got to be a spider to get out of there.
Holy. That is. Like.
They all three sound exactly the same.
There's no way that would pass the 85 decibel Laguna Seca. You couldn't even drive.
It has to be on open day.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Blown away.
So as a tribute to Peter, because he always painted his headers and exhaust yellow, this one has the yellow exhaust.
So crazy.
I asked Peter one time, I said, why did you do the exhaust yellow? Does it mean anything? He goes, silver and black are boring. When you look up under there, it's nice to see them.
Yeah.
And that's where the original ones off the 46Z
Right.
are all right there.
Huh.
Those are pieces of art.
Yes.
So this has been this is 72 510. This has been a race car with local people in the Virginia area for years. It's Larry and Dee Edwards. They raced it for years. And then Glenn Shue in California ended up with it. And since he ended up with a Trans Am 2.5 liter 510, he sold this to me a few years ago. And I drive this on track days.
I love that. So, like, for example, this says Newport Datsun, right?
Not the Newport you're used to in California.
Right. But it's funny because I love that was a thing, right? Before it was because
they probably gave him $500 to go to the track.
Exactly. And then
and
Rob
buy gas.
Rob has the Bay Area Datsun dealers.
Exactly.
One, you know, so it's kind of a
Well,
fun.
that was a consortium. I think the Bay Area Datsun dealers all like pitched in to put these cars. I mean, that's how it was all a shoestring budget. But it was the old days. You've heard it 1,000 times to race on the weekends and win on Sunday and sell on Monday. And that's why these people supported these cars.
I mean, for the time, these cars were actual cars. They weren't so far gone. You know, not like the race cars that we see now. It's like there's no relatability a lot of times, right? Minus like the GT4s and the GT3s. Or whatever.
Yeah, I mean these were just pedestrian vanilla street cars. That's why there's not too many of them left, because people put 200,000 miles and they ended up being sucked up with a vacuum cleaner and as rust. I mean they're not around. So you know you used to be able to pick up a street 510, a decent 510, for $5,000 or $6,000, and now it's
good luck.
Yeah, now you can't even. You got to spend 20 to do a motor.
Yeah, and then so this one is the actual number 46.
Yeah, this is not mine. This is like I said, I have a relationship with Dave Bishop and Dan Pass and Jonathan Bueller. They've allowed me to bring this to my facility just to give it a little bit of loving. They have so many cars there, and I feel bad for those guys. I mean, it's a thankless job sometimes that they have to take care of all these cars. And since we have Rob, and I've got actually a friend of mine owns a Porsche race shop up the street. Michael Everhart owns Vintage Motorsports, or Vintage Racing rather, and he's got all the AN lines and fittings and this, that, and the other. So we've recently done all the mechanicals, gone through it just to make sure this stays the way it should stay. Because this car is exactly the way it came off the track in 1972. John's last race was at Riverside where he won. And they did not have a trophy for him for this last race. So the official came over and gave him this fishing hat that he sent me about 4 months ago and said, I want you to have that. And this is all that white helmet is the helmet he's pictured in, and the Z and the 510 that he gave me. This is his race suit. And this is when he won in the Z car in 1970. That's his first place medal.
Incredible.
But this car has only been on the track in 2001 at Laguna Seca, the Rolex reunion, and in 2010. And I think he and Vic Edelbrock got into a little, in the Camaro, got into a little scuff into turn 3, I believe.
Wow.
But
it's just so crazy to me. So that's the thing is, like, Nissan, when they were still in Southern California, I don't think they didn't really have even a place for a lot of these cars. They were just in like a warehouse.
They were.
You know? They were just under covers. I remember visiting it before they moved to Tennessee, But now, luckily, at least they have a little more room.
They had a bit more room. And like I said, we have a relationship where, I'm just trying to help them out and keep this car, where it should be, because it's one of the most iconic Datsuns ever. And what John did in this car. And if you go to YouTube and watch the movie Against All Odds, which Rob and I probably watched 150 times apiece, we know every line in it. And it's a great story about the 2 years, because the first championship it won in 1971 was actually, he didn't win it till Monday because Horst Queck and the Alpha team had cheated, had 3 more gallons of gas. And then the next year he ran off with it, and with probably 4 races left in the season, he'd already clinched it.
Awesome. So behind you is not a race car, or I mean, it is a race car, I guess, now, but it's not a historic race car. This is a new build?
So what I wanted is, since I have the remaining parts of the iconic 46Z and John races it for me, I wanted to build a street version, but still you could take it to the track. I mean, it's a full race. It's got the same, at this point, I kind of wish I didn't do it, but it's got a 5.5-inch clutch on it. I mean, it's an on and off switch, and I got to drive it on the street. It's not easy, but it's and we don't build them like this anymore we barely go over the 2.8, but this is a 3.2 stroker, and I don't like to build them like that anymore. They're just like bombs. They're not good for racing. It's too long of a stroke, and at $20,000 to pop it after 8 or 10 hours is not fun. But for a street, this will last forever being a street car. I'm a little reluctant to take it out on the track, but Rob Fuller built this at Z-Car Garage, and this livery is the famous Porsche 24 livery.
Yeah.
And like Peter Brock calls it, he said, that's cross-culture, isn't it? And I said, it is. When Rob finished the car, and I mean, it took a couple of years to build this, and Bryson painted it. And this is Porsche Tangerine. We were going to do it lava orange, and then my buddy Michael said, no, you need to do it in tangerine. It really pops. So we built it. Rob did just the wheels to do this offset. He builds them backwards from the space, and he just did an amazing job using the Panasport race wheels.
It's cool because it's a lot of new and old, like, for example, the Rocket Bunny flares, right?
Yeah, and we met the guy. He actually signed it under here. He doesn't speak a lick of English.
Yeah, Mira-san.
Is that his name?
K. Mira, yeah.
Yeah, he was such a nice guy, but he didn't speak any English. We met him at this car was at SEMA at the Braille Battery space, where Gary Savage and those guys were nice enough to let us park there, and Peter Brock signs autographs there. But so this is built exactly like the 46 race car. The 46 race car uses a Harrison Corvette radiator. They always did back in the day, and they still make them, so that's what that is. And of course, all these race cars now, we got to put electric fans on them because they go to a lot of shows, and they just, you don't want to cook it. But it's, I did the Alcantara dash. I just thought that was a different touch. When I went to California, I had all the livery that I got from Italy all rolled up in a tube, and Rob goes, I hate to tell you, but we're probably not going to put all that stuff on the car. And I went, just wait till the cake comes out of the oven before you make that assessment. So the first Jägermeister, the first decal we put on was this one. And I said, guys, just leave me alone for a second. So I squeegeed on there, and as soon as I pulled the masking off, Rob and Josh and a couple of guys were going, oh, Billy, we may have something there. Yeah. And I was the only one with Bryson. Bryson and I were the only ones that go, do the livery. You got to do the livery. And the car, when I look at pictures without it, it looks like an orange car.
Yeah, the livery adds to it so much. And it's so simple, too. That's the fun part about it. It's so simple, but there is just certain iconic liveries, like the BRE Datsun livery and then the Jägermeister livery. It's like of the era, and it just looks right.
It does. Well, there's actually on Instagram, there's actually Jaeger livery on there, and they have all the Porsches and BMWs. And it's a German deal. And like Peter said, this on a Japanese car, it's cross culture. But it was my build, so it was just something I cooked up. Yeah,
it looks cool. I love it.
And I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Let's move on. You have so many cars here to talk about. So we have some more modern cars.
So the 350Z Nismos were made in 2007, 2008 as a continuation. They made, the number in the States was like 1607, 1613 total in the world. I think 6 of them were sent to South America or somewhere, I'm not really sure. But so the bottom is a Pikes Peak white, and then the top is as an 07. and it's got like 31,000 miles. But this guy up here is a Nagaro Red '08, and it's got like 3,800 miles on it. It's like a brand new car, original tires. And I just liked them from the standpoint they were very limited. They were numbered. They were stitch welded. Autech put them together. You saw the GT car in the office, the model that it was inspired from. So I'm kind of a nut for limited production type cars, and I think one day there'll be something. I just enjoy the car.
You have a white one and you have a red one. That's awesome.
Yeah, I really just wanted one, but then I bought this from Jessica. She had it for a number of years, and then I think I bought this from her on a Thursday, and then this car came up on this following Saturday. So.
Oh well, you get to now.
Yeah.
You got some trucks too.
So this 620 pickup truck is a 30 or 31,000 mile original paint car. It's called True Blue. And it looks like today's Porsche Mexico Blue or one of those lighter blues that Porsche has out. And I just love it. It's all original. Rob looked under the hood when he was here, and he just went, oh my gosh, everything is original. It has original spare. And it's just a cool, this was a first year for a 5-speed 77. And when I first saw this, I thought somebody put these decals on here because I've only ever seen the Datsun logo.
Right.
So, and a buddy of mine goes, no, you don't understand. That's factory like that, because I guess I'd never seen a 5-speed. And then this was the first year for the King cab, first year for 5-speed. And actually, the guy, King, was some marketing guy with Nissan. I didn't know where the name King Cab came from, but Dave Bishop and Dan Passon all know the story. His last name was King, and they named it that, and thus everybody thinks these are King Cabs. Kind of a generic name now.
Interesting.
But it's in great shape. I really enjoy driving this. It's got the L20B motor in it.
And then you got a land speed.
This was something I got from the Heritage Museum at Nissan. The real car, we don't know where it is. So what they did, this set a record. If you look at the back window here, sorry, it's in the distance. It was the world's fastest 4-cylinder. It went 142.9 miles per hour. So what they did is they built 2 cars, or they actually built 3 cars. They raced one, and then they had 2 that went around the country, like one West Coast, one East Coast, to help sell the D21s to pickup trucks. So it's only got 4,000 or 5,000 miles. The interior's unbelievable. They're all race prepped. It's got the parachute on the back that they say works. They said don't pull it.
Yeah.
So it's been at a couple of shows with Nissan, and I don't currently have it running, but that's the next project.
So many projects. So Racer Brown, we did a full video on. If you guys want to check out that video, so I actually drive that on the street, which was absolutely insane. You got a couple non-Datsuns here. You got a amazing modern Porsche GT car. Right.
Yeah, that's the GT3 RS. That's the last of the 3-pedal right now that we know it. They still make the GT3 in a manual, but I'm old school. I mean, you got to have 3 pedals to me. I just really enjoy, like somebody always said, you want to have the most fun. And so this is the 11 model.
I think, honestly, this is probably the most fun car I've ever driven in my life. It's so much fun.
It's got the Sharkworks track exhaust system on it that I was telling you about earlier. I got from Alex, and at about 7,500, 8,000 RPMs, it's got a really
this thing is where it's at, like the manual and just all of the revs.
So these are Porsche homologated these uprights for they only wanted to make one set. So Portugal, I understand, was a standard. So it was all based off Portugal, and they were 3 inches lower than these. And when you look in the rearview mirror, you had nothing. You were looking into this. So Alex had a guy in Maryland make these from a aircraft company.
Oh, wow.
And they powder coated them, and they're 3 inches taller than the stock ones. And the first time I got in the car after having the other ones, I actually had a rear view mirror, which was awesome. And I had a buddy of mine come this weekend, and he's got one of these, and he's going to order those. But, it comes from Porsche with these graphics. The only thing we added was a little bit the Porsche here, the dive planes, but everything else is Porsche. Oh, other than just little touches.
Amazing, beautiful car. And then you got a Mustang here?
My little brother passed away at 43, and he was a Mustang fanatic, so I wanted to do something that he would have loved this car. And a real GT 350R now is probably somewhere between $800 and $1 million. So a guy built this in Los Angeles in '91 and actually sent it over to Carroll Shelby. And he signed a letter here because I guess he was friends with him. And Carroll drove the car and gave him some information. And then the livery that I copied was actually from one that was in here. It was in Atlanta for 40 years. The guy that owned Gran Turismo owned it, Harris Connor, and he had it for years. He's since passed away. And Irwin owns it up in the real car up in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a tribute livery to my brother and to Harris Connor's
Wow,
car.
what a beautiful looking car. Incredible. So do you ever drive this on the track?
So this is a straight piped race prep, ready to go. This car raced HSR a couple of years ago, not by me, but the previous owner. And since I had a title, I went and got a license plate. So I drive it on the street, take it to car shows, and it will. I mean, Helen Keller could hear this car.
Jeez.
It's a ground thumper.
That is
But it's built
incredible.
exactly like the.
Can we check out the engine bay on this one?
Absolutely.
Wow, look at that. Something else. Very cool.
Thank you.
And then you got your daily driver here.
I drive. That's probably the car I'll put the most mileage on with the Ratson over there. But yeah, Michael takes care of this at Vintage Racing for me. It's a Euro '83 930.
You actually have a real Euro plate on it?
Yeah, I had a guy that I know used to make those plates up, so I just put on there. I drove around with that on the back and got pulled over a couple times, so I finally put a legit license plate. I mean, I had the license plate in the car, I just didn't have it on it.
Yeah.
And then Porsche made these fantastic Recaro racing seats back in the 80s. And so that's the only thing I changed out and put those on here. When you sit, if you've never sat in that seat, you got to sit in this seat.
Okay.
It is.
I gotta check it out.
It will grab your lats, and it's very comfortable. And these are the braid wheels on it. But it's just such an enjoyable car. But since I'm a redneck and I like noise, the turbo, the exhaust goes in the turbo and straight out of the pipe. And it pops and cracks and snarly. It's a snarky
These
car.
are so much fun. The
Old school.
Widowmaker, right?
What's that?
Widowmaker.
Yeah, that's what they called it.
Yeah. This is interesting. This is this your only right-hand drive car?
It
in
is.
your collection?
It is.
Huh.
It's a
What's this?
71 Skyline. Alex McDowell bought it. Apparently somebody in Japan had changed it and put the badges a GTR. It was born a GTX. Still has air conditioning and all that on the car. And it was born white with a kind of a brownish interior. And then they painted it silver and left the brown interior, so I couldn't stomach that. So I did the interior in red. And then I put the graphics on there. It's got the 2-liter motor, which is not very strong, and it's got a little over 100,000 miles, so it's a not very strong old 2-liter. So I'd like to drop one of the race motors in there, but the pickup is on the opposite side here. So Rob helped us at he and his guys had to swap a motor at the Midi a few years ago with one of the 40-year-old motors I got with the BRE stuff, and I'm thinking about putting that motor here, but we have to change the pickup on it.
This is so cool.
The body is unbelievable.
It's so clean.
My better half, Anna, the first time she saw this car, she just, the front of it, she goes, that nose is wicked.
Yeah.
And she said something about the front, and she's not really a car person, but she was like, wow, the rear, and then the rear, the way they curved the trunk lid and all, it's just really intricate. It's an interesting body style.
You also have the best plates.
I just think it's fun.
I think part of it is that your collection is more on the rare side here in Georgia. So all of these cool plates aren't taken yet, you know?
What was funny is on the pickup truck over there, I wanted to put True Blue on there, and somebody already had it, and I went, really? Somebody has True Blue? So I spelled blue like blue cheese. I swapped the letters around.
That's so funny.
But I was surprised at the Jaeger car that they let me put Jaeger Bomb, but it's JGRBOMB.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I love this car so much. How is
It
it?
gets the look. The young people lose their minds over
bet.
this. So one morning, Anna and I got up early, and I literally said, hey, I'm going to go to Caffeine and Octane. I'm going to drive this. And Bruce Feifke runs it, and TJ run Caffeine and Octane here. And So I said, yeah, well, let's take that car. Or I said, I'm going to take that car. And I said, you just sleep in. And she goes, no, I'm going.
Yeah.
So we drove this car on a whim. And all of a sudden, TJ walks up to me and he goes, dude, your car's in the finals. And it ended up being Capital One car of the show. And they gave me Brian's piston.
You're serious?
Yeah, it was crazy. But the young people just, I guess they've seen it in all the video games and they just go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that I know we've seen a couple of them on the West Coast. I know a couple of people who have them, and then when you go to like the Japanese classic car show, it seems like there's so many of them, but they're actually so few and far between. I'm sure, especially on the East Coast.
I think there's probably, somebody else said there was another one in Georgia that's silver, but I've never seen one. Before I got this one here, and people will run. That day we took this to Caffeine and Octane, Anna and I were laughing. There were people running across the parking lot going, there's a Hako. They were screaming and yelling. After a while, it was comical.
That is amazing.
They were screaming and yelling.
The bag is hilarious.
Isn't that,
Every time I
funny?
see it, it's so
I know,
funny.
and it's still there. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, what I would love to do to this car is almost what Alex McDowell, who owned this car, has in the race version, the number 9 car. I'd like to take all the carpet out of it. I'd like to put race seats in it, put a race motor in it, just a metal floorboard. That's just more my personality.
Honestly, and that's okay because this is not a real GTR.
No, it's a GTX.
You do whatever you want to it.
Exactly.
I mean, because the thing actually that surprised me the most, the thing that actually blew me away the most when I went to Zama, the Zama Museum in Japan, was actually seeing the real GTRs in new condition.
Oh, they're incredible.
With the stock flares. It just blew my mind. It just made sense to see kind of where so much, what I guess the aftermarket and the tuning world, where they got their inspiration from.
That was crazy. Well, that car as a 4-door, I think won like 38 straight races, and then I think these numbers may be off a little bit. And then I think as the 2-door, it continued the next year, and it was like a 4-door race car. It just whipped butt there.
It's just not even fair at that point.
No, I think they had probably changed the rules so it wouldn't, that's what all these racing sanctions do. That if somebody's dominating, you got to change something up. But I'd like, since it's such a rare body, but now that I did the livery and all on it, I hate to tear it all apart, but.
No, it's cool, just the different stages of all these builds that you do. Because you have the ones here in your collection that you preserve. And then, for example, these cars, and like the Jägermeister car, it's cool for them to get a special second life, a more special life, because if it was just the stock GTX rotting away in Japan,
it would just, it was another car. I don't know who did the badges and all. I don't know. I don't think Alex did them. I think it was done in Japan because it wasn't over in this country that long before he bought it. But, it is what it is. It's got Watanabe wheels on it, so it's kind of cool. But maybe someday I'll take it to the next level.
Cool. Let's move on to your collection. It's a very big collection. So we did a full video on this already. So if you guys want to watch that video, definitely check it out. I love this car so much. And then now you have some stock ones. Well, first of all, you have this race car here.
Well, we could talk about this car for a couple of hours, but I won't bore you with it. But before we get to that, this is an interesting story about this trailer. Mm-hmm. So when Peter Brock was with Carroll Shelby, and he taught the school, there's pictures online where it says Peter Brock instructor at Carroll Shelby School, and of course John Morton was sweeping the floors. That's what he started doing. So Carroll Shelby one day said, Brock, go make me a single axle trailer so we could take these Cobras back and forth to Riverside. And then there was a local track in LA that I understand now is townhomes. And he said, we just need something to run them over. So Brock had a couple of these made. One of them had a pull pin where the thing would teeter. And Morton has a story about that where he forgot to pull the pin and drove one of the cars off the end of it.
Oh, no.
But this was the one that did not. This one has ramps. And so I restored it. Here's pictures of it. And I knew it was white because of that picture. And Peter wrote this for me. So it's been with the car.
Funny
it's been with the Z's and Peter for all these years. And I told Peter I was going to put a winch on it. He goes, don't put a winch on that. With these are skinny tires. When I put the fat tires on, there's like a quarter of an inch. I mean, you have to winch it up. But anyway, so the trailer's a cool story.
And then now Peter makes trailers.
And now Peter's doing the Aerovault, which I got from him last year and made a trip out. And that thing, you don't even know what's behind you. It's ridiculous. You have to keep looking in your rearview mirror because it does not feel like you have anything behind you.
That is a great story. I mean, because you look at this, I didn't even look at it. Like I didn't even realize it was
very
on
simple.
a trailer.
It's a very, very, but if you look at the trailers back in the 70s that everybody had at these races, we have so many historical pictures of vintage races, they all look like this. They were just single axle trailers. I mean, Bay Area Datsun dealers, Glenn has pictures where they back the car on them and they look, I mean, think about it. It's the simplest design. You got one axle and it just came to a V and you had a tongue on it.
Oh. Let's move on to the
that car we could talk about forever. That's the original.
We'll talk about that.
So this is a 1974 260Z, and a friend of mine was a great racer around here, Chet Whittle, ended up selling this car to me. It's had a little bit of work, I think, on the right side, but I'm not sure to what extent. The car is pretty much in its original state. It's got
this
like
is
40.
Original paint?
This is all original paint.
No
the
way.
only paint that's not is a little bit on that side. And I think the door may have been resprayed in this piece, but the rest of it's all original paint.
I've never even seen this color.
Before I got this car, I'd never seen it. It's called green metallic. I'd never seen the car. And then when I showed pictures to my friends, my buddy goes, "Oh yeah, my wife that was her original color car." And it almost looks like Porsche has a new color out like this. And I'm colorblind. People say it's green with a little bit of a gold cast to it, but it's an untouched 260Z.
Wow.
And these never got any love. They literally call these flat top carburetors the green monster cans because people would take them off and just throw them in the dumpster and put SUs on there. But it's got 48,000 original miles. It's a California car. I still have the California plates on it.
Incredible.
And you have to mess with these carburetors to get them to run. So it runs a little rich, but it runs great, and the interior looks. I mean, it's just amazing.
Amazing. Time capsule.
The 260's only being made 1 year, and of course they made the short bumpers the first part of the year and the long bumpers the end of the year.
And the original hubcaps.
Original hubcaps. Cool. This has the date-coated wheels, the spare's still in there. I mean, it's 48,000 legit wheels. Like I said, I've never seen the color, and I've never seen green inserts in side molding either. I'm usually not I'd rather have the car without side molding, but it doesn't bother me on the later cars. So this is one of the 37 vintage Zs. So what this was, and Nissan decided in '96 that was going to be.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
This is one of them.
So yeah, they decided in '96 that was going to be the end of the 300ZX. So Bob Klukas, who now races the Natural Light, which is really the giant killer car too. It's got two personalities. I told him one time you ought to paint half of it the Natural Light and the other half the giant killer. And he was with Nissan, and they decided, let's go out and find like really clean 240Zs and let's restore them in California and sell them as refurbished Nissans with a warranty. So they were going to build, at first, they were going to build 200 to 300 of them, and they only picked out like 10 stores around the country to sell them. They're called vintage Zs. So in Pete Evanow's book, he lists 38 of them. There's only 37. The 38th VIN number that he has, because Pierre did 23 of these cars in California, and Pierre, at one point, I had 8 of the 37. That's how stupid I am. I got rid of them. So I had 8 of the 37. So Pierre said, "You're such a vintage Z nut. I'm going to give you." He gave me I got his personal photo album. Mr. K was there. It's like a family photo album you go through for this event they had to kick off in '97, and he gave me the production schedules. I've got all the VIN numbers. So when somebody goes, "Oh, I have a vintage Z," I go, "Oh." And they want to know, "This is a vintage Z, right?" And I go, "Let me have your VIN number." But the vintage Zs have the circles in the quarter windows, and it has the plaque on the console. If it has those 3 things, it's usually a vintage Z.
I've never seen one of these before. You know, it's funny because when I first got into Zs, this was like a story that would circulate among us Z enthusiasts. You know, we're like, "Oh my God, it's just so crazy." How much were they when they were available?
Well, what happened was, I believe the first ones went out and they were $24,995. Can you imagine?
I would buy.
Wait a second. Like this.
Are you kidding me?
It looked like this.
I just.
So this.
I'm so blown away they couldn't sell them.
So this one was actually sold at Furman Nissan in Tampa. And unfortunately, the young man that bought this was a drummer in a band. And at like a young age, I want to say in his late 30s, he had a heart attack and passed away. And his widow sold this to me. And this is Lemon Lime 112. And out of the 8 vintage Z's I had, this one by far was the best. And I actually sold it to a good friend of mine, Jeff Mader, who lives up in the Boston area. And Jeff's a fanatic about keeping the cars perfect. He just won all kind of awards at Z-Con. He's got a blue car. But so he had this car, I want to say, for 10 years and sold it back to me a few years ago, thankfully, because I had 8 of them. And then I moved to a beach town down in Northwest Florida, and didn't want to do the whole warehouse thing again, so I ended up selling a lot of my cars. But this was the best one I ever had. So 6 of them I sold to Jim Frederick, who's down in Lutz, Florida, and Jim calls his place Z Mecca, and you need to go down there and check out his place. And he already had 2 vintage Z's, and then he has 6 of mine, so now he has 8 vintage Z's. He also has the very first 240Z ever sold to the public, VIN number 13.
Wow.
He's got number 16. I sold him 17. I restored 17. He's got, I think he's got 19. I mean, he's into, everybody's got their little niche. I'm kind of broad stroked.
Yeah.
Adam Carolla is very Paul Newman centric. And then Jim Frederick is early VIN numbers, and he's very good at it. He restores them himself. He's great for the brand.
So see, now this is where it begins of like, oh, I know where to go next.
You have to, you have to go. He's in Florida. He'd be glad to show you his cars. Yeah. So like I said, he's got 8 of them. But Pierre was very nice to me and ended up selling me the banners they had at the kickoff, and they've since moved on. I wish I had them back. But this is how they did the cars. I'm
crazy. So blown away. How much do you think these are worth now? They're all over the place.
Well, so this particular car was sold at Furman in 1998 because a lot of them sat on the showroom floors, and he bought it for $35. So there's one still in the showroom floor in Guam, and it's Safari Gold. And I talked to the guy there. Calling Guam is like calling downtown Atlanta.
Yeah,
I mean, this was 20 years ago I called him, right. and the guy was actually in the military, never went home. And he said, yeah, we have a Safari Gold Vintage Z sitting on our showroom floor. And I said, would you be interested in selling it? He goes, yeah, but we probably want like 35 or 40 for it. And back then it was like, oh, that's crazy. I mean, that's just too much.
Kidding?
Yeah. So fast forward, a good friend of mine, Mike Rogers, who I mentioned earlier, Mike was in this garage a couple of months ago, and Mike's got an incredible collection of Shelbys and Cobras in Mooresville, North Carolina, and he's also got a Datsun collection down in Pensacola. So he walked up to me and he goes, Randy, he goes, and I don't want you want me to throw a number at it and tell you what he said?
Oh, what did he say?
He literally said, I'll wire you $130 for this car right now. And I said, because there's 2 of them that sold supposedly for $150 in Japan. So I said, Mike, I let this car go once. I don't want to lose it again. I said, I really appreciate it.
And honestly, it's only going to go up in price more now. I think a 432R sold for
I think it was $900,000.
Yeah, almost $1 million.
Yeah, so, it was sold in Japan. They got flipped to Australia.
So now the crazy thing is, pretty soon, who knows? It might take the throne, like a Nissan might take the throne from Toyota as the most expensive
the GT,
Japanese car.
2000.
Yeah.
It could. I think those cars were still hovering around $1 million. I think one sold for $1.2 million one time. I'm not sure on that. But so Mike was in this garage, and I said, Mike, I love you like a brother, but I don't want to sell the car.
Yeah.
But he looks at me in his North Carolina accent, and he goes, well, how often do these cars come about? And I said, Mike, there's 37 of them. And I said, I know there's a couple in Japan. There's one sitting in the showroom at Guam. And I called them probably 5 years ago, and they said, oh, we wouldn't take less than 150, 200 grand for it. This was a couple of years ago. So Mike said, they never come up. And I said, nah, they never really do. And so I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks later, I'm looking at Bring a Trailer, and a lemon lime one, Vintage Z, comes up on Bring a Trailer. I couldn't believe my eyes. So I called up Mike Sage, who owns Nissan stores in LA, and him and his brothers do, and they own a Mercedes store and a couple other, and a Ferrari store, I think. And Mike had the other lemon lime that I know about. So I said, Mike, are you selling your lemon lime? And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, or your Z car, do you still have the lemon lime? Because they had 3. They sold me a yellow one, but they had 2 other ones. They had a silver vintage Z and a lemon lime. And he goes, "Well," he goes, "actually, I'd sold that to my partner at Thermal Racetrack." And he goes, "I don't know, maybe that is." And I said, "I think it is the VIN number," because I looked at my VIN sheet. So he said, "Let me call my partner." So he calls my partner. He goes, "Yeah." He said he's selling the car. He had vintage air in it. And he goes, "Yeah, he's looking to get about 50 grand out of it." Mike bought it on Bring a Trailer. And so he was going to offer me 130 of this. So Mike bought it. I think it went for 104 or 100,240 plus commission. So Mike now has a vintage Z, but a crazy story, an adjunct to this story is when I went to buy my yellow one from Mike, because Mike had VIN number 222 that they restored for his dad, because his dad was like the second dealership in the United States. So when I got to his dealership, because years ago when he bought them from Nissan when they moved, I flew out to LA, and he said he had a lemon lime, not this one, but he had the lemon lime one that Mike just got, and a yellow one sitting there. But right before I got there, this truck had backed into his lemon lime one here, and there was a big dent. So, but I really wanted the lemon lime because I always liked that color. So I said, "Yeah, but I'd rather take the car that doesn't have any body work." So I looked inside, and these medallions were here, but that plaque wasn't there on the yellow car. So I said, "Mike, here's my problem." I said, I want to take the yellow car, but it doesn't have the plaque, and the lemon lime car does." He goes, "I don't care, take it." So I went, "Are you sure?" He goes, it had 3M tape on it. So I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah." So I took it off and I put it on the yellow car that I ended up buying that Jim Frederick has now. Long story short, when I bought all the stuff from Pierre and he gave me his photo album, he said, "Randy, I have one of those plaques left." So I had it literally in my office for 10 years, 12 years. When we rebuilt the BRE race car, I stuck it on the console. And when Mike buys the lemon lime car now on Bring a Trailer, it's missing the console piece because I put it on my yellow car.
How funny
so I took it off the BRE race car and put it on his.
Amazing.
So it was kind of a
That is incredible.
crazy story. But this car,
you guys are probably wondering why I'm freaking out so much. But if you could imagine, back then when we were first getting into Z's, I just turned 21. My friends were all the same age. We're getting Z cars for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. That's how much mine was. And we were swapping motors in them, SR20s, this or that, and the other V8s, right? We couldn't imagine, we're like, "Oh yeah, they restored a couple of these, right? And it was $25,000. Wow, that's too much." Now, if you think about it, $25,000 for something like this, I would buy it
it's nuts.
Tomorrow. I would buy it today,
Well, I asked Jim Frederick in Florida a few weeks ago. Like I said, he's got 8 of them. And I said, "Jim, where do you think the market's going on these vintage Zs? Because there's 37 of them. He owns it. He's cornered the market." And I said, "If somebody wanted to buy one of your vintage Zs right now, would you sell one?" He goes, "Minimum 250," because he said that's where it's going.
Yeah.
And this car, but I like driving the car. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
I can't believe you drive this thing.
Yeah. On a Sunday, I'll drive 5 or 6 cars. But here's the thing, Larry. I don't really care what these cars are worth because I'm not selling them.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm gone, then whoever takes care of, Ann will have to worry about all that later. But I'm not into what the cars are worth and flipping them, and I just like them for the history of what they are. And
that's important, kind of really. That's what's important is you are able to enjoy this, and also you really are sharing this. You're sharing your collection, and this is so inspirational. I've never seen one. Well, I'm so glad to see one now.
Well, I'm glad you're seeing one then. I know a lot of people that have these cars, and they want them to go skyrocket in value, and I don't know why, because I don't think they'll ever sell them. I just want it to happen, just naturally, wherever they go. But, there's some people have said, there's games being played out there with numbers, and I don't really care about any of that. I love the car. I love the color. And it drives like a brand new car.
Incredible. So cool. Can we take this out for a ride later?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. You won't believe, I tell people all the time, I drove somebody in this car a few weeks ago, and I said, when you drive this car, you just put yourself in the position that like we just went to a showroom. It's 1972, and the guy said, "Let's go for a ride." That's exactly what this drives like.
I can't tell you how. Those of you guys who watch this channel, you will hear me say this all the time. Time machine. It is a time machine. It will bring you back to 1972.
When you drive this, you're going to freak out how everything's because everything was refurbished. And Jeff took the best thing that Jeff made her do with his car is he drove it to the shows. Some show in Boston, it was about 2 hours away. He drove it there and back, which I think is awesome. So cool. he just kept the car.
I mean, like all of the stickers, everything is brand new, right? Like
everything.
All of the hoses,
everything.
It was all new old stock, or they had to remake it.
Right, now I just put these on there because at the time, nobody had the braided radiator hoses. Jay Ataka's done, and thank you, Jay. He's done a great job. Like he went to the people the manufacturer that manufactured these back in the day and had them. He's got them, back in the States. He's got these hoses, and they're just cool for like geeks like us that like this stuff.
Even like the original fuel filter. So crazy.
Well, they ran into the biggest problems with this. They oversold them. Nissan was pushing these 4 or 5 shops to get them out. And it takes time to build these.
Yeah.
And then they started running out. They ran a run of dashboards.
Really?
But at some point they started running. They couldn't keep up with the parts. They couldn't keep up with the production. So they just went, we're out. 37.
Yeah, that's it.
But Pete's book has 38 listed, and the 38th one, I got on a tangent earlier. The 38th one, John Gill, who ran the Nissan Museum back before they moved, John called me and said, "Randy, we got a lemon lime. It was going to be a vintage Z. We bought it from an Admiral at across the water in Coronado. In Coronado, and this car's got like 95,000 original miles. Still has hubcaps, but we have no title." And he said, "I'll deliver it to you." I think he said, "I'll deliver it to you for $3,000." And I went, "Okay." I didn't have a title. And in Georgia, you can just list an older car with it, you just register it. And actually sold it to my buddy when it got here, but it was supposed to be number 38. So there's only 37 of them.
Wow. All right, now, while we can talk a lot more about this, because I love that thing so much, let's talk about this.
So a friend of mine in Chattanooga, Wayne Bridges, found this car with like 52,000 miles in Chattanooga, and the guys who had it owned like an MG shop, and the father offered it to the son, and the son goes, "Nah, I'm not really into it." I think he lived out west. So Wayne got a chance to buy it, like I said, 52,000 miles, but I think it sat in a warehouse, and maybe through the concrete, the MG shop actually put new floorboards in it, and they did a fabulous job. And it looked like they used NOS floorboards because they were a shop, so they knew what they were doing. But it's 918 orange, and it had a little rust bubbles on the side, and I said, you know what? One day I was bored. I was sitting here one Sunday. I took about 12 different colors of spray paint, and I taped off the glasses, started spraying the car, and then it was about 95 degrees outside, so I took a bottle of acetone, and I started spraying, it started bubbling up, and I took a pressure washer and I hit it, and it came out like this, and I was going, and I wiped that fender off clean. And then I had my graphics guy make me a stencil. This is actually spray painted on here. White.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's spray painted. And I used some of the decals from the 46 car, and I don't know, just a fun car, but people
it's
like it.
It's kind of like the Ratsun.
Look at the license plate.
Yeah, well, because this is the Ratsun.
This is really a rat.
The Ratsun, Mike Finnegan's, the roadkill one.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So I had this spoiler that I had painted a spoiler and some flares over here, a whole set of them. And originally that orange car was not going to be a Rocket Bunny car. It was just going to be a flared car. So then I ended up with this. So I threw the front spoiler on. I threw the BRE spoiler on the front, and I put the VTO wheels.
You drive this the most out of all your 240Zs?
Yeah, I drive this one a lot. You know what it is? It's just a stock 240Z. We put new brakes on it. I just changed all the hoses out on it, and it's got 53,000 miles on it. And everything stock except the radiator, and I sprayed it black because it was an aluminum radiator. But it drives great. Now, Rob does have like KW. I'd like to put a suspension on here because when I got the car, it looked like it was sitting up real high. So we just cut a spring. I'd like to put something right and adjust it because when you go over a big dip, it'll bottom out.
Yeah, I just put the KWs on my car.
Are they great?
Oh my
It's a game changer.
It is a game changer. I mean, part of it is that you just see the time and the effort that they go into making these
Wow.
shocks. You know, I've been to KW Fichtenberg in Germany where they make them.
Wow.
And they start as a piece of metal, and then by the end of
They fab it up.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
At the end of the line,
No.
it went from a metal tube, and now it's this crazy,
It's
you know,
unbelievable.
super engineered.
Well, I think
shock.
Rob's got those now. They're going to be part of Z-Car Garage suspension. I'd love to throw that on here. But,
Yeah.
you know, at the end of the day, if I wanted to take cleaner and acetone and wipe all this stuff off, it's a 918 original car.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so a couple more cars in your collection that we'll touch on briefly. This is this a...
It's a 370 Nismo. So in 2000, it's a 2009 Nismo. So in 2010, they had a BRE reunion here at Road Atlanta where people brought their BRE cars, and they had Peter Brock take a gray, you can see the color inside the hood and all. They took a gray 370 Nismo and they sent it to Millen, and they did a whole, they basically made I forgot the level, maybe T2 or something, race level. And it just sat for years. It doesn't have, but when I got it, it had 700 miles on it. And now it's got 1,100 miles. And my friend did an exhaust. It's deafening when it's cold, but it's just, you know, matches the livery, and it's a fun piece.
I love that.
Yeah.
What a cool helmet. Yeah.
Well, my friend wrapped that Stillo helmet like that, and he did a great job just to match the car.
This is cool.
There's a picture in the Road and Track of when they had it in the article.
And then this is your...
This is the Z31. It's the unloved years.
this is
the 84.
This is I think Rob was telling me the story about how, you know, when people call and ask if he works on Z31s.
Does he hang up on them?
Something like that.
Yeah, he would do that. Only
it's
Rob would do that.
unfortunate, you know, because he's like, look, I have enough. I have it up to here with the 240Zs in terms of like just so many coming in. He's trying to get them in as much as he can. To spend time on a Z31 means pulling away time from a 240Z. You know?
The only guy that I know that's really, and he's great with them, Alex Millward, I forgot how to pronounce his last name, Milford or Millwood. He actually has a Z31 business, and he knows everything about them. And he is the guru of Z31s. So this car was actually used as a pace car from 84 through 89 at Road America.
Oh,
and this is
okay.
a picture of it on, this was during an IMSA race, and this was caught on Speed World. But
That's so
they
cool.
used it for 5 years. And
What a cool car. I love that.
yeah, it's got
Official
17,000
piece.
miles on it.
Road America. Amazing. This is a cool car.
The funny
What a
thing
cool piece
is
of
when
history.
Nissan stopped sponsoring this in '89, the scrapyard down the street took like 19 cars, and they were just going to scrap them. So that's why it has a 17 on the windshield. This was
way.
number 17 out of 19 cars. And I talked to the owner, and he said, we parted out every car of the 19 except this one. He said, I could never bring myself to part it out. And it sat in his warehouse from 1989 until I got
Look
it
at the
a couple years ago.
interior.
Yeah,
It's brand new.
But this was supposed to be a race car because look, it's got manual wind-up windows,
No way.
slick top. So I think it got sent over either specifically for a pace car, or maybe it was supposed to be a race car.
I love your plates. Your plates are all
I forget
epic.
which plate I have on there. Oh, Z31 pace. Yeah.
That's so good.
And this one had the BBSs. Now there's a car just like this in one of the Nissan books. I think it's actually Pete Avenow's book, and it has the regular wheels on it, and it says it's the one they use at Riverside, California, but it's a turbo. This is an NA.
This one is super historic. This
No,
one's
actually, this one it's a super. This is a display car of a super historic car. So this was sitting at Nissan Heritage Museum, and it was just built to take around the country because of the iconic car, which is on the wall here.
right. Oh, so
that-
this one's not the actual car.
No, the actual car is sitting in Costa Mesa, California at Steve Millen's. I actually, Anna and I went there for Thanksgiving. Steve was nice enough to show us the car, and it's this car right here.
Oh, he still has the car.
Oh, he has the car, and it's in California. And, you know, it was Johnny O'Connell, John Morton, and Steve Millen in 1994, 24 Hours at Le Mans. And I didn't realize it until Steve told me. He said Johnny O'Connell, who was just the honorary driver at the Midi a few weeks ago, but he said Johnny was actually sick. So he and Morton had to pretty much drive the 24 hours, and that was in 1994. So that is the Clayton Cunningham 75 car. So Nissan they had a few of these built to go around to dealerships to help sell the Z32s. So this is strictly a display car. Has no engine
or anything.
No, has no.
Wow. Okay, so this was already. So I've seen this one already then.
Yeah, they used it as display.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've seen this one because it was in their warehouse they had.
Yes.
In Torrance. Yeah.
Yep, sure was.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been there for years, but I thought it was a cool piece.
What a cool piece. Huh. Interesting. It sure looks, it plays the part. It fooled me.
Well, I believe when they made the other bodies, that's what I think happened, because you can't go back and, it's so much easier to build 3 or 4 of them at one time than to go back and try to replicate it, but it is strictly a display car.
Okay. Tell me about this.
So this is an interesting story here. So Bob Sharp, when I got this car, I called Bob Sharp and I sent him the pictures, and then Scotty Cole, who's Bob Sharp's right-hand man, they're getting ready to actually launch a Sharp Motorsports division. And I sent him pictures of this, and I said, Bob and Scotty, can you tell me, when this came to you guys, what happened, blah, blah, blah. What Bob thinks this is one of the first, probably the first, the 1984 300ZX, the first one they got. And he said, Randy, you have to understand, we had all these L-series motors for all these years, and all of a sudden they get this VG V6. He said, we got to play around with it for a while. So he said, Fitzy, who drove those 2 cars, and Newman just raced it for a year, just beat the crap out of it. And he said, we just use it as a mule trying to figure out how to get this thing. And it probably ran in some SCCA races. Whoa. And then Adam Carolla has all the other ones that went from here to the next level in the big V8. But Bob thinks this is he actually asked me if he could buy it 2 weeks ago on the phone. He said, will you sell it back to me? He said, I'd like to, because it doesn't have a tranny, it doesn't have a motor. But it's a full tube chassis, as you can see.
Yeah.
But they took some parts off of it. He said it sat in his showroom for years after they raced it. So it was really, I think, their first one of their Z31.
Incredible.
Yeah,
so this really is a full tube chassis.
The floor,
if you can't even stand on that.
No, these Zeus fasteners, you take the whole body off, it'd be naked and. Yeah. There was a company, I forget the name of the company, up in Connecticut where Bob had his dealerships. But yeah, so, and it's literally the steering rack. It's a sweet steering rack, and it's just caked with grime and all. It's pretty amazing. So it definitely had road time.
So what would you do with it? Are you just going to keep it as a display car?
You know what, Rob wants to, when I first got this, Rob goes, let's race this thing. Let's throw a motor in a tranny. And I go, on whose budget? Every time you go to mess one of these cars, I don't care if you're restoring a Pinto or a Vega, which was my first car. It's just dollars per hour. It just goes nuts. There was that Parkinson car that has all the 46 original parts on it. It's $150 minimum to get that thing back on the road.
Yeah.
Minimum, and probably $200.
Right. Done properly.
Done right.
Yeah. Yeah. This, even if you put a modern Nissan engine in it, as soon as you run it and then who knows, a tire blows out or whatever.
Oh, I'd have to redo these BBS wheels. You'd have to start with new wheels and tires, and I would go back and do a vintage VG motor. I'm like that. I can't, not do what or not have in the car what it came with.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Incredible. So tell me about this.
So in 1990, the NP90 car was made, and the NPTI car. Nissan used Lola in the very beginning, like 1985, 86. They used Lola bodies for these GTP cars, and so then Trevor Harris and all those guys in San Diego basically started this company. And they started building these cars. These were literally rocket scientists if you stand in the back of this car and look at this, it's just an incredible aerodynamic car.
Yeah.
So this is a 1990, but this is a shell only. And what everybody believes this was is they took this to the track as a backup shell, just in case they went into the wall, because these things were light, but you can't have a forklift at the track, so they built this roller system so they could roll it, and just in case it got smacked, they wouldn't be out. So the one that won 8 races in a row, and I've got a little write-up here, this is the one that sits in the Nissan Museum now. This is the 1988 car. So John Morton drove it. Jeff Brabham won Driver of the Year in 1988, but they lost the points to Porsche by the points championship, I believe, for the manufacturer by 1 point. But he won the driver championship, and then the next 3 years in a row, 89, 90, and 91 in these cars. This was the 90 version. They won 4 driver championships in a row, 3 manufacturers in a row. These used to supposedly, and Chris Wiles just wrote this book on the GTP. He was on the crew. Ashley Page was the crew chief. They said these cars had 10,000 pounds of downforce. It could literally turn it upside down, it would fly.
Yeah.
And I think if you stand behind this car, Larry, and if you look at the fuselage in this, to me, it's better looking than some of the LMP1 cars now. It's just got such an iconic look.
Yeah. I mean, this is, yeah, it's just that era, right?
It is.
It's like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of thing, you know?
Well, GTP meaning prototype, obviously, but these Nissan kicked butt for these 4 years, and then the Jaguars came in and Toyota, and they all had 2 or 3 years where they figured it out. But these guys, Trevor Harris is a setup genius, and
does this
Ashley,
open?
What's that? Yes, it opens.
So what? Just like that. So why is it that it still has like a floor and stuff?
We've been trying to figure out what exactly this was used for, because it was at the Nissan Museum, and so far the consensus was it was a backup shell in case they put it in the wall.
But it still has like backup stuff,
right?
Or like all of this is potentially backup. Too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with you giving engineers a certain amount of hours, they would switch everything off, because when these bodies hit the wall or whatever, they just, it was made to just disintegrate. So you wouldn't have anything, and you'd be out of the race. So I think they built this roller system so they could take it there. But so far, we haven't gotten clear answers to what it was.
Huh. Interesting.
Other than a backup shell.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it looks the part, like even the molded seat and everything.
Yeah, you can, if you want to hone in on this was actually owned by Nissan. There's their ownership tag in it, and then that's the
property
details.
Yeah, you have a couple, or
yes.
Yeah, you have a couple cars that have that tag.
On the 510, that belongs to Nissan, and
right.
Like I said, we're just helping out with it, but that has that tag in there as well.
And then
the Flats car.
And the Flats car, they still own that.
No.
Oh, you own that.
The only car they own that's in here right now is the 510.
Okay. Oh.
Yep.
Jeez. There's just so many things. I mean, it's endless. You've really blown my mind. I'm like,
this will blow your mind.
I'm not speechless that often when it comes to the collections.
This will make you speechless. So this is the 427 Cobra. That's Ken Miles. That's a young John Morton.
Wow.
And this is Phil Remington. So if you saw the movie Ford versus Ferrari, these guys all played a key role.
Yeah.
So this was the first professional race ever that John Morton drove in. And the story was Carroll Shelby came over to Ken Miles and said, "We're going to Sebring." And Ken said, "We have 7 drivers." And Shelby goes, "You can't go with 7, you got to have 8. So he says, "Well, we're going to take Morton." And he goes, "Why Morton?" He goes, "Well, he can drive." He goes, "Where's he going to stay?" And John goes, "I don't care. He slept in the car." So Ken Miles is driving, this is a 427 Cobra, and this is in 1964. So he's driving this Cobra and he hits a tree. That's what they're doing right here. Phil Remington's fixing it. It looks like they spray painted it, and that's John driving the car. And they went out, and John said, "But I don't have a license. I can't drive it." Or they were building the car back. And John said, well, Ken, what time do you drive? He goes, his arm apparently was messed up. He goes, no, you don't understand. You're driving. He goes, but I don't have a license. He goes, don't worry about it. They walked over to the officials, and the lady goes, where's his license? And Ken Miles said, he can drive. That's his first professional race, John Morton. Amazing. And he's still racing 60 years later. And that's the car.
Amazing.
At Sebring.
The memorabilia, the stuff that you save, like this is kind of one of those, I mean, it's cool to have the cars and it's cool to have all these parts, but the memorabilia also is just like another level of collecting, I guess.
This is actually the turbo off of the car that won all the races. Jeremy Stillwell and David Bishop wanted to get this thing running a few years ago, so to start it up at Amelia. So they went to start it and the turbo had cracked. So we ended up getting, there's not many of these turbos. This is a Garrett. And Chris Wiles just wrote this book on the GTP. And when I asked the guys where they got this turbo, they said, we just went down to Garrett and bought a truck turbo, like a tractor trailer rig. So anyway, we found one from Toby Bean's family. And so I ended up getting this as a piece of memorabilia. So that's the turbo that won all the races.
Oh, is this the cracked one?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, or the seals are cracked and all that. So we couldn't use that. But that's the manifold. And it's just a unique piece. So I like all that stuff. I'm probably the only one in the world that,
I don't know. I mean,
that cares about
this stuff is so interesting to me too. All of the pieces that you have, like a lot of this is the original.
Yeah, that's
stuff
the original seat from the 46 car. That's John on the grid right there in this picture with the 33 Bob Sharp car next to him. And the guy's wearing his Coca-Cola pants.
That's the original seat.
That's the original seat. And this is so BRE had 4 motors. They had the original one in the 46 car, the original motor in the number 3 blue and white car that fender's off of. And then Nissan gave them 2 other motors. So they just rebuilt them and rotated them. This was actually the last motor at the last race, the 71 that won the championship. And it's dated because it was in November of 71. And John Caldwell, the famous engine builder that built me the motor in the flats car, so he dynoed this. What was the date say? November 71. And these are the horsepower runs. And these are all the dyno sheets from this motor. And John said this was the most powerful motor out of the 4 because he remembers the 280.1, which was the most. This is a bench dyno, of course.
Wow.
And then these headers are the original George Boskoff fabricated these headers. They're all individual pieces. And we were at the Midi in 2018, and I used them on the car. I mean, we have the roll bar on there, we have the heat shield, we have all the parts, and they just started to give way. And so a friend of mine asked John to sign them, and so we carry this around as a display piece.
Wow,
incredible. And then there's a couple of the wheels. When the car got wrecked originally in 77, 2 of the wheels survived, which are over here. Those are the 2 that survived on the right side of the car. And the rest of it, we have what we have on the car.
Yeah. Well, pretty soon you'll probably be driving that car, right? Once it gets back from
I hope
California.
so. It should be ready in about 3 weeks. Rob and his guys at Z-Car Garage are just, I mean, they're doing an incredible job on the car. But everybody tells me not to race it anymore. It's like a museum piece. And even Morton said, wow, he said, I'd be afraid to work on it. But if he feels up to it, we'll race it again.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for showing us your awesome collection.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, because we could talk shop all day, and then I don't know if you guys will be able to watch a 2-hour video. It's like a movie, you know?
Yeah, it's probably bore everybody to tears, sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I definitely appreciate you showing us your collection. What a day. Thank you so much. I'm going to take some more pictures. I hope you guys enjoy all the materials that we get here.